Next, we move on to specification number 4, which asks us to compare the flower structure and pollen of insect-pollinated and wind-pollinated flowers. So now we will examine how their structures differ from each other and understand the key differences between them. As you can see here, the diagram compares an insect-pollinated flower, like the lily on the left, with a wind-pollinated flower, which looks more like a wheat or grass plant on the right. Each flower has structures that are specially adapted to its method of pollination so that pollen can move efficiently from the male parts to the female parts. In insect-pollinated flowers, the petals are usually large, brightly colored, and sometimes scented to attract insects such as bees or butterflies. The stamens, which include the anther and filament, are generally positioned inside the flower so that insects brush against them while visiting the flower. The carpel contains the stigma, style, and ovary. The stigma is sticky to catch pollen brought by insects, while the ovary contains the ovules. Sepals protect the flower bud before it opens. In contrast, wind-pollinated flowers, like those of wheat or grasses, do not need to attract insects. Their petals are usually very small or absent. The anthers hang outside on long filaments so the wind can easily shake them and release pollen. The stigma is large and feathery so it can catch pollen grains carried by the wind. These features help the plant carry out pollination without the help of animals. Their pollen grains also differ depending on the method of pollination. These images show the differences between pollens from insect-pollinated flowers and pollens from wind-pollinated flowers. These differences are special adaptations that help plants reproduce successfully. In insect-pollinated flowers, pollen grains are produced in smaller quantities, but they are larger and heavier. Their surfaces are often sticky or covered with tiny spikes or hooks. This helps the pollen attach to the bodies of insects such as bees or butterflies, which then carry the pollen to another flower. Because insects transport the pollen directly, the plant does not need to produce a large number of pollen grains. In contrast, wind-pollinated flowers produce very large quantities of pollen. These pollen grains are small, light, and smooth so they can easily travel through the air. Since wind pollination is random and many grains may not reach another flower, producing a large amount of lightweight pollen increases the chances that some will successfully land on a stigma of another plant. So, if we compare them, insect-pollinated flowers and wind-pollinated flowers show several clear differences in their structures and features. In insect-pollinated flowers, the petals are usually large and brightly colored to attract insects. In contrast, wind-pollinated flowers have small and dull-colored petals, often green or brown, because they do not need to attract pollinators. Insect-pollinated flowers also produce scent and nectar, which attract insects and encourage them to visit the flower for food. However, wind-pollinated flowers usually do not produce scent or nectar since they rely on wind rather than animals for pollination. The number of pollen grains also differs. In insect-pollinated flowers, a moderate number of pollen grains is produced because insects transfer pollen efficiently. On the other hand, wind-pollinated flowers produce very large quantities of pollen since many grains are lost during wind dispersal. The pollen grains themselves are different as well. In insect-pollinated flowers, they are larger, sticky, or spiky so they can attach to insects. In wind-pollinated flowers, pollen grains are small, smooth, and lightweight so they can travel easily through the air. The anthers in insect-pollinated flowers are usually inside the flower and firmly held, so insects brush against them while collecting nectar. In wind-pollinated flowers, the anthers hang outside on long filaments, allowing the wind to shake them and release pollen. Finally, the stigma in insect-pollinated flowers is inside the flower and sticky to catch pollen from insects. In contrast, the stigma in wind-pollinated flowers is large and feathery and often extends outside the flower, helping it trap pollen carried by the wind.